Hello and welcome to the Band in a Box drag and drop video tutorial. In this video we're going to show you how you can export tracks out of Band in a Box and into digital audio workstations or DAWs such as RealBand, Sonar, Reaper, and Pro Tools. First of all, I've got a song loaded in Band in a Box, a country waltz with the Brent Mason soloist on the soloist track. Now I'll first show you the very basic task of dragging an audio track into Windows Explorer. I'm first going to put Band in a Box into the Digital Audio Workstation or DAW mode. This just instantly shrinks Band in a Box to a smaller size so you can see the folders or DAWs beneath it. It's also always on top, meaning even if I click on the window below it, that window is active, but Band in a Box still appears to be above it. You can change the Always on Top setting by clicking on the Options for DAW plugins and remove the check from Always on Top. Now you can see I've got an empty Windows folder open underneath Band in a Box. I'll first show you the most basic thing you can do. The Brent Mason soloist was on the soloist track, so I'll click and hold there and drag and drop right on the empty window. And we now have a WAV file sitting in that folder with the name of the song plus BB Soloist indicating that it came from that track. And let's give it a listen in Windows Media Player. And because we only dragged that one track, all we're hearing is the soloist track. And there are lots of other formats you can drag in. For example, WMA, MP3, MP4, and M4A. For example, I can select MP4, and now when I drag this finger-picking guitar, we can see that it first converts to MP4, which of course is much smaller since it's compressed. We're now going to look at dragging into a DAW. I'll change the audio settings back to WAV. And now you can see we have PG Music's RealBand open in the background. For this example, I'll take the bass track and drag it and drop it right on the first track here. And when I play in RealBand, we can see that we now have the bass track. The bar lines are not lined up, but you can see that it's easy to just change the tempo and meter to make it match the Band in a Box song. So that's what happens when you drag and drop audio. With MIDI, you have a few other options. Back in Band in a Box, you can see that the piano track is yellow, indicating that it's a MIDI track. The others are green, indicating audio reel tracks. Let's just see what happens when we use the default settings and just drag the piano track into RealBand. And we can see that we now have a MIDI piano track. But if we wanted, we could also have an actual audio track there. There are two ways of doing this. The first is to go into the DAW plugin settings and select Drag Individual MIDI Tracks as Audio using VST or DXI. Or, as we can see in this hint, we can leave that unchecked but hold Control as we drag. I'll try that method. I'll do the same thing as before, but I'll hold Control and then drag the piano track into RealBand. And we can now see that the MIDI was converted to audio, which appears here as a waveform instead of the MIDI piano roll. Another thing you can do is drag only a small portion of the song, and, depending on the DAW, you can also sometimes drop the file somewhere other than the beginning. I'll demonstrate both of these things here. If I highlight bars 5 to 8 in Band in a Box, and then drag the drum track but drop it at bar 1 in Real Band, we can see that it only generates 4 bars because we highlighted those bars in Band in a Box. And it started them at bar 1 in Real Band because that's where I dropped it. Now, we'll also take this opportunity to show you how you can drag and drop out of Real Band as well. Real Band also has a DAW mode, as you can see. Now I have that same folder open under it, so I'll take the audio piano track we made and drag it and drop it in Windows Explorer. And we can play that now in Windows Media Player exactly as we did earlier with the files directly from Band in a Box. And if we look at the settings, we can see that we have similar options here that we have in Band in a Box. We're now listening to one of our Jazz Funk Real Tracks demos, and we're going to use this to look at dragging into other DAWs. And we're going to start with Pro Tools. Now, with this and some other DAWs, you need to add an additional step. Whereas with Real Band, we could drag directly from the track in Band in a Box to the track in Real Band. Some DAWs don't allow this, and nothing will happen when you try. In these cases, there is a simple other step, and it is what we call the drop station. The drop station is this area here. So for whatever track you want to drag, and in our case we'll start with the bass track, you simply have to drag it here first. Wait for the file to prepare, and when it's prepared, the drop station will turn green. And you then drag that into the DAW. And here now is our bass track in Pro Tools. Another option we'll show you is dragging the whole mix. If, instead of picking an instrument track, I pick Combo and drag that to the drop station, and then into Pro Tools, we can now hear that we've got the whole band playing in Pro Tools. And there's also another way to hear the whole mix. In the DAW plugin settings, you can choose to drag Combo as separate tracks. Or again, as you can see in the hint, you can simply hold Ctrl-Shift while dragging Combo. This time, rather than using the hotkey, I'll just change the setting. And now I'll drag Combo to the drop station. And then when I drag that to Pro Tools, we have all the individual tracks, which we can then mix and process in Pro Tools. A quick look back in Real Band shows you that the drop station is present here as well. It works exactly the same in Real Band as it does in Band in a Box. Here we have a 70s soul groove playing in Band in a Box. Now, before showing dragging and dropping into Pro Tools, I said that some DAWs require you to use the Band in a Box drop station, but not all. Since there are so many different kinds of DAWs, the best way to find out for sure is just to try. For example, I have Sonar open right now under Band in a Box. I'll just try dragging this piano directly into Sonar, bypassing the drop station. And you can see it works just fine. If it didn't work, then no problem, I'd have just tried dragging to the drop station first. I've now got the DAW Reaper open, and for this one I'm actually going to be working in the other direction, starting off with a song here and adding to it from Band in a Box. I've got the song Frontier loaded in Reaper. It was originally recorded to a click of 120 beats per minute, which makes this process a little bit easier, but this could still be done even if it wasn't. I'll look in Windows Explorer to find this Reaper file, which is here, and it's a small file, frontier.rpp. And here is frontier.wave, which it's referencing. In Band in a Box, you can use the audio chord wizard to determine the chords and tempo to Frontier. We explain how to use the audio chord wizard in more detail in a different video, but we can see here that we've opened Frontier, we've set the initial and first few bar lines, which determines the tempo, and the program has figured out all the chords, which I can then send to Band in a Box. Now here, I just want to generate a pedal steel part, which I can then drag into Reaper, adding to the song. It's at 120 beats per minute, so in the Real Tracks picker, I'll filter by pedal steel, 120, EV, which finds only pedal steel styles which would work at 120 beats per minute and are even eighths, as opposed to swing, since our song is even eighths spaced. You'll notice that it's found different tempos, but with the superior stretching features in Band in a Box, they'll all still sound good stretched to 120. So I'll pick this easy even 136, which will be stretched down to 120. And I'll generate the part. I'll highlight the first 16 bars, and Reaper is not one of those DAWs that needs to use the drop station, so I'll just drag directly into Reaper at bar 2, where the song actually starts. And we've now added a new Band in a Box track to an existing song in Reaper. And this can of course be done in the same way with any of the DAWs we've worked on in this video, as well as countless other DAWs. Now the last thing I'm going to show you is some under the hood stuff. If I go back into the DAW options, this bottom area of the settings dialog has to do with the actual locations of the files on the hard drive that we've been dragging and dropping. The default is CBB drag drop, but you can set it to any location you like here. I'll press the Show Files button to actually locate this folder. Now we can see all of the files, audio and MIDI, that we've dragged and dropped throughout this whole video. All of the Waltz Brent files, the Jazz Funk files, the 70s soul, and the frontier files. Now, if you do a lot of dragging and dropping, this folder is going to get pretty full, and there are a couple of options for dealing with this. In the DAW plugin settings dialog, there is a Recycle Now button, which would delete everything in this folder. And there's another option to recycle all dropped files in this folder every time Band in a Box boots up. Now, you have to be careful with these, and you have to understand how your own DAW handles imported audio before you do any of this. In some cases, when you drag audio into a DAW, it will either copy that audio into its own project folder or into the file itself. If this is the case, that would make the files here redundant, and you could delete them whenever you like. But with some DAWs, when you drag in audio, it just references these original files. If that's the case, then when you play your song in that DAW, it's actually referencing these files, in which case if you delete them, the DAW won't be able to find them, and it'll be silent for those tracks. So let's have a look at the different DAWs we've used in this video to see how they dealt with the audio we imported. And from that info, we'll know if it's safe to delete this folder. Working backwards, let's look at the Reaper files. Our Frontier song was saved in My Documents folder, in a Reaper files folder, in a Frontier subfolder. Now let's look at all the files here. Frontier.rpp is the actual Reaper file. It's very small because it doesn't actually contain any audio. It just points to external audio files. And here is the Frontier song that was originally in my file. But you'll notice it doesn't contain the file we dragged in, the pedal steel. And if we go back into Reaper, right-click on the wave and select Source Properties, we can see right here that the source is our BB drag drop folder. So if we delete all the files in that folder, or even just that file, we can see that it now appears in Reaper as offline, and if we play it, we can no longer hear the pedal steel. But there is a setting in the Reaper preferences, Media, Copy Inserted Media to Project Media Directory. I'll check that, and I'll go back to the saved song in Band in a Box with the pedal steel, and I'll try exactly the same thing again. So here's our pedal steel file in Reaper again, but if we now go to that same project folder, we can see that our pedal steel file is now here. So for Reaper, if you make sure that Copy Media to Project Media Directory is enabled in the preferences, you then can feel free to trash the contents of the drag drop folder whenever you like, or have it done automatically on boot up. Next, moving on to Sonar. Like with Reaper and many other DAWs, when you have an audio track in Sonar, you can simply right-click on the file to find out its location on the hard drive. So I'll do that and select Clip Properties. And the Audio Files tab, and you can see that the file is in my Cakewalk Projects folder, not in the BB drag drop folder. So using the default settings in Sonar, it would be fine to trash the contents of the drag drop folder or select the settings to have it done automatically. Now to Pro Tools. Pro Tools is an interesting case. It, like Reaper, has a setting to automatically copy files on import. But as you can see, I didn't have this on. However, if we click here to see the regions, we can see exactly where the files are, and we can see that it actually has copied files over to the session folder. The reason for this is that Band in a Box exports these files as stereo WAV files, which Pro Tools cannot read. Instead, it has to convert them to 2 mono WAV files. And since it's converting, it puts the new files in the Pro Tools session folder. Good news for Band in a Box, this means it's fine to remove the files in the BB drag drop folder. But it's important to keep in mind that if you're importing mono files, this won't be the case, because Pro Tools can simply open mono files as they are without converting them, in which case it doesn't copy them to your Pro Tools session folder. So, as I mentioned earlier, you can also drag and drop from RealBand. I've got a short mono track recorded in RealBand, so let's see what happens when I import that into this Pro Tools session. We can see that it does actually leave it in the RealBand drag-drop folder. So it actually would be best to change that setting in Pro Tools to automatically copy files. And when we try that again from RealBand, we can see that it's now put the files in the project folder. So, in summary, Pro Tools is like Reaper in that as long as you have the prefs set correctly, you can safely trash the contents of the drag-drop folder or select the settings to have it done automatically. Now finally we'll have a look at RealBand, to the file we originally imported and saved, the Country Waltz. Now RealBand is different than many other DAWs in that it doesn't reference external audio files. The audio is saved right in the RealBand file itself, which is an SEQ file. So here we have a RealBand file with 3 audio tracks, bass, piano, and a short drum track, and a MIDI track. The MIDI is saved right in the SEQ as well, but MIDI information is comparatively much smaller. So in the Band-in-a-Box drag-drop folder, we can see that the 3 audio files we dragged, the bass, the piano which was converted to wave from MIDI, and the short drum segment, add up to about 75 or 76 megabytes. And when we look at the RealBand file we saved, we can see that it's 75 megabytes, which is what we'd expect since it contains all of the audio information from those 3 wave files. So since the audio is saved right in the file, we definitely don't need to save those waves, and we can safely trash the contents of the drag-drop folder. So for all the DAWs we used in this video, we made sure that our settings were such that we can now safely recycle the contents of that folder. And we now know we can also set to always recycle that folder on boot up. If you're using a DAW that was not demoed in this video, likely if you follow the same steps, look in your preferences, and look in your project folder, you can determine whether or not it will be safe to recycle this folder in the same manner. Or you could always just leave the files alone there just to be sure. We hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on dragging and dropping, and if you have further questions, please visit www.pgmusic.com.